Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. It's wonderful to see your gorgeous faces here on Zoom. It's wonderful to see everyone in their various states of pajamaness. I would love us to begin today with a chalice lighting. I have a chalice here to light, and Glenn Maxwell is going to speak our chalice lighting words. Alex, can you unmute Glenn? Okay, thank you.
We light this chalice on the brink of a new year, letting go of what has been, opening and hopeful for what may come, renewed, restored, ready to live life fully anew. May we move forward with intention.
Beautiful.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Thank you, Alex. Today, we are going to have a very chill service. It's going to be a couple of songs and mostly questions with a chalice lighting. I am sitting in a beautiful Chicago skyline apartment, and there's snow falling over the buildings of the city. It's lovely and relaxing, and I hope that that will be the spirit of the service that we have today. So Alex is going to play us an opening song in a moment. And I would love for all of you, I invite all of you or whoever is feeling the spirit to send Alex a question, or it says Northwest UU Church in the chat that says anything that you have a burning question to ask. It can be about Unitarian Universalism. It can be about religion in general. It can be about morality. It can be about the universe. And Alex will take some of those questions and read them out, and I'm going to have to answer them on the spot, which usually goes pretty well for me, except I realized that this time I'm not going to be able to walk around and do it. So we'll see how my head works when I don't have that kinetic movement that usually helps spark my synapses. It's also, by the way, an hour earlier here for me. So, Alex, but we're going to have a good time, and I think it'll be worth it just to be with each other and talk about the big important stuff in the universe. So, Alex, please feel free to delight us with. Thank you, Alex. That was beautiful. Before we get into the questions, I wanted to answer the questions of what are we doing the next 2 Sundays to just remind us all. Next Sunday, we are going to have a joint service live in person at Northwest. We're going to be doing a New Year's ritual. And the Sunday after that, so that's going to be January 7th, January 14th, the Sunday after that, we are going to be having a joint service in Detroit to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And that service is going to be a potluck after service. So if anybody wants to bring goodies to share, remember it will be a joint service, so there may be more goodies required. So please feel free to do that. And I also would love to invite anyone. The way I do question box sermons is I start to answer, but if anybody feels that they can answer the question better or has a burning desire to answer it differently, please chat me. And I will, uh, you know, depending on time and how many people are chatting me, open it up to other folks because I am certainly not the only person in the room with wisdom. So with that, let's begin. Alex, are there any questions for me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. There's a lot of good questions coming in. Some really hard-hitting ones, but we'll start off with an easy one. Is there any particular book or books you would recommend reading? I joined UU within the past few years and would love to keep learning.
So if this is a book or books specifically about Unitarian Universalism, all right, look. My favorite book about Unitarian Universalism, somebody said they cannot hear you, Alex. My favorite book about Unitarian Universalism is called The Unitarians and the Universalists by David Robinson. Here's the problem with the Unitarians and the Universalists. It is out of print and it is a little bit dry, but it has an index in the back so that anything that you want to know about, from like the fellowshipping movement to the transcendentalist movement, we have a lot of movements, you can go right to the index and go and read about that specific thing. And it sort of like lays out the story in a way that is like, oh, and this is why this thing happened. This is what was going on in the milieu. This is what was happening in the pews that made, a lot of history is like this great man, like, oh, when this guy said this, everything changed. And it's like, no, usually there's something going on in the world and the leaders pick up on it and speak about it. And so the Unitarians and the Universalists lay that out really, really particularly well, and I love that. If you're just asking for any book that you should read, one of my favorite books ever is The Life of Pi. I know that's strange, but that's like one of my favorite sort of like Hero's Quest sort of books. Folks, if you could send your chats to Alex and not me, that would be helpful because I can't read them and answer at the same time.
What I can do is I can remove your co-host privileges and make them only talk to me. And I also got some comments that my volume was a little too low, so hopefully this is better.
Okay, great. Well, but then I told them that they wanted, I told them they could chat me if they wanted to answer the question differently.
That's true. Okay. So now we're going to go for a little bit of a harder question.
All right.
What should a church social justice committee do? How should this differ from other nonprofit or political social justice organizations?
I love this question. So for me, a church or values-based community like a church, a congregation, whatever it is that we're calling ourselves, our job isn't to do the direct service work. There are people out there and organizations out there that are supposed to do direct service work, right? A soup kitchen is supposed to feed people. A shelter is supposed to house people. A program for children is supposed to do direct services for children. Our job is to support and connect. Our values teach us that every human being is worthy and whole. So our job is to support those organizations. So, First UU Detroit is very connected with Freedom House. And this year, sort of last minute, they called us up and said, okay, we've got a whole bunch of kids. Freedom House is a refugee organization in Detroit. And they called us up and they said last minute, we have a whole bunch of kids and we don't know what, they've never had Halloween before. And, you know, what do we do? What do we do for these kids? And they called us up and they said, can you send us volunteers last minute and go shopping and get a whole bunch of costumes? So we went and supported them in that way. We got a bunch of costumes, some people came and showed up. It was lovely. And it wasn't us saying this is what the refugees need, because I would have never thought that the refugees needed like Halloween support for their kids, right? That wasn't a thing that I would have come up with. But it's partnering with community organizations who share our values and supporting them through their work. Does that make sense? So what I like to do is just do a whole bunch of relationship building. You know, relationship building with organizations and with people on the front lines of need, and relationship building and listening.
Great, thank you. We've also had some people ask for you to repeat the questions because apparently my volume is a little wonky still.
I can.
Thank you. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
I'm gonna open this up to the group.
African or European?
That's not something I learned in seminary. If anybody knows. All right, I think Google can answer that question for us better than I can.
For those who aren't familiar, that's a Monty Python reference.
Oh,
Monty Python, the Holy Grail. What kind
Steve
of...
said that is roughly 20.1 miles per hour. Learning new things here.
Look at that. What kind of endowment funds does the UUA have? Do you have any idea how much money is in them?
I don't know the exact amount of money that is in the UUA endowment funds, but I know that a lot of their money comes from, so do you all know about Shelter Rock? So Shelter Rock is this congregation in upstate New York. And there was a lady in I think in the 60s or 70s. So, all right, let's go back a little bit. In 1961, when the Unitarians and the Universalists emerged, Dana Greeley was the first UUA president, and he was rather visionary, but terrible with a budget, and he spent all the UUA's money. So when Bob West took over as the second UUA person, he was like, I don't know what to do. We have to cut all of the programming. They cut 50% of their staff. They weren't sure the UUA was going to be able to continue. And then this lady was like, oh, I have some old stocks. I guess I'll leave them to my church in Shelter Rock. And they turned out to be worth millions of dollars, like millions upon millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. And the church was like, oh, we've suddenly become like richer than foundation. We don't know what to do with all of this. And they backed the UUA with that money, but they still control it. So it's really interesting. So they have those Shelter Rock funds, which are technically not theirs, but have been promised to the operation of the UUA for a long time. And that's millions of dollars a year, which is not an endowment. And then the UUA itself has an endowment, of which I don't know how much, but the UUA also manages the endowment of several churches. They have an endowment management fund where they manage a bunch of church endowments. So these are all questions that I could learn more about if anybody's particularly interested, but that's what I know off the top of my head.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, also tangentially related, Harvard University, which has the largest endowment of any school in any college in the US, their endowment was given to them by the Unitarians. It was Unitarians who made that endowment. And to this day, most Unitarian seminarians, they still have a Unitarian seminary track. And a lot of the people that take that track don't have to pay because Harvard's still like, you guys already paid us enough.
That's fantastic. So we're responsible for Harvard, is what I'm hearing.
I mean, in many real ways, yes, honestly.
There's a comment that our Mid-America Regional UUA has endowments as well.
That is true. The Mid-America also has endowments. of which I do not know how much they are. And Mid-America is sort of the only region that is not like fully encapsulated by the UUA and has its own independent board, I think, on which Jim Moyer either still does or did at one point serve.
Yep, nodding his head over there. Can you talk about the Gadfly movement?
Oh, do I have to? Okay, all right. This is a story that could take a really, really, really long time, and I'm going to try to make it not. There is a minister in I think it was the 2018-2019 General Assembly. It was the one in Spokane, Washington. The minister of the UU Church in Spokane, his name is Todd Eckloff, passed around some pamphlets to the GA called the Gadfly Papers. And in the Gadfly Papers, Todd Eckloff laid out his disagreements with how Unitarian Universalism was approaching racial justice. I am not going to get into those disagreements here. Y'all can read them if you want to. It's a widely dispersed paper at this point. And there were a bunch of folks at the GA who read it, and particularly people of color who felt like it was insensitive and not a great thing to pass out. And the GA itself said, hey, wait a minute, we're supposed to be working on this together. Why, we came to your home place and you were helping us plan. You didn't tell us this was going to happen. We feel a little blindsided. Why don't you come into conversation with us and we'll figure this out? Here is the biggest disconnect with the arguments about the Gadfly movement. The story Todd Eckloff and the Gadfly followers will tell you is that Todd Eckloff has been utterly removed from Unitarian Universalism and his power taken away because he said things that people disagreed with. People that disagree with Todd will say that he was taken out of the community, and he wasn't really taken out of the community. He still has his job and his church, and Unitarian Universalists ordain their own ministers, so he has been deep fellowshipped by the UUA, but he himself is still an ordained UU minister. And what those folks will say was Todd was asked to come back into conversation with the community, and he was told he couldn't continue to be in fellowship, to be in covenant with people, because he was refusing to be in those conversations. He did something people said was harmful, and it wasn't the thing that he did that made him not welcome back into GA space. It was the fact that he wasn't willing to talk about that harm or accept that he had hurt people or be in conversation about it. So it has branched out into folks who are it's this weird mix of folks who are wanting to be really clear about folks who are saying that free speech is really important, and that we're having emotional safetyism and protection when we talk about the harms that we've done. And then these other folks who are like, no, really, free speech is the government tamping down on your speech. We're not doing that here. We're saying we're in a community, and if you harm someone, you should come back to the table and talk about it and care. And there are some really insidious parts of the movement where the argument about free speech and democracy is really just a way to cover up the fact that they don't like that Unitarian Universalism is passing eighth principles and becoming really motivated and committed to repairing racial harm, which is something that is hard for a lot of white people to think and talk about, and they throw kind of emotional temper tantrums sometimes, and that's some of what's going on too.
Sounds like there could be a whole sermon series on the issues and the ways forward from here.
There have been so many.
Well, let's go to a lighter question. Why is the sky blue?
Isn't it because different wavelengths travel at different speeds, and the blue ones hit you first? Is that it?
It's something like that. Steve gave us the thumbs up. I'm not a scientist. is my husband on here? I don't see my husband on here, so he could probably answer this for us. But
Okay, that's pretty impressive that I was able to pull that out of nowhere though, right? I'm definitely not a scientist.
okay, here's another kind of hard-hitting question. What can we do about the Gaza and Israel conflict?
So this is difficult for me to answer because I've given a sermon about this at Detroit that I haven't given at Northwest. And so folks at Detroit know that, I'm sorry, somebody says it has to do with nitrogen scattering blue light. Well, there you go, with why the sky is blue. So my stance is that there are many things that are complicated about this situation, and if we want to figure out the solution to the situation, we've got to take a lot of history and context and nuance. And what is not complicated is that right now there are thousands of children being killed all the time, and we're funding it. I don't agree with Hamas, and I'm not funding them. So I think the most important thing that we can do is to stop killing as much as we can. And I think that what we can do as UUs, as US citizens, is to tell our representatives that we don't want our tax dollars going to support warfare in any country, in any place. I think we should be doing that, but particularly in Gaza. And it's really hard because this is a hard conversation. It's built up about trauma. Like there's generations of trauma on both sides, and you can't have rational conversations about trauma as the people in it. So it seems like, and we have a lot of power wrapped up in supporting one side of the movement in the United States, and it's really hard. So I think we're going to have to raise our voices to say, wait, let's just stop, pause, cease, and regroup and try to figure something out. Because yes, there are horrible atrocities going on, and many people have done those atrocities. And there's no way to answer there are thousands of children being killed with but. There's no moral way to answer, well, but. So let's just stop the killing. And I think what we can do is talk to our politicians about that, because they're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's a good one. What does an adult RE program look like?
Oh, there's so many ways. There's so many things an adult RE program could look like. Honestly, in most churches right now, there are not adult RE programs, because I don't know if y'all noticed this, but church has been hard after the pandemic. And there's lots of stuff. There's lots of stuff that is taking up people's time. I am going to brunch and learn at my husband's synagogue, and going to talk about how the Unitarian Universalists and the Jews once got together to fight empire like 2,000 years ago, and the Jewish folks, and at the time. And we're having a bunch of experts get together on one subject matter and teach each other. That's what an adult RE program could look like. It could look like taking field trips. It could look like the minister teaching a class. It could look like congregants teaching a class. It could look like getting together and having discussions and book groups. I think there's so many ways to learn from each other and to tackle new subjects and gain new knowledge from each other, that it can look like whatever people have time and energy for. I know that's not the most succinct answer, but
It's good. I think we need to think more about what our religious education programs can look like outside of just for kids. I know that Northwest has been thinking about trying to get an adult RE program started for a while, and so thinking about all the ways it could look is the first step. What comments might you have about the, quote, final revision of the Article 2 Purposes and Covenant?
Oh, Lord, you guys.
Not pulling any punches today.
Not pulling any punches. Okay, all right. So here's here. You want my honest, because I have some hot takes that a lot of other ministers do not. And here are my hot takes. I really love, well, this is not a hot take. I love the inclusion language. I love that the language is more inclusive. It's very clear about our inclusion value. And I love that. I love that there's action statements that go along with our values. That is so great because it's no longer like, hey, we're sort of thinking about this as a value. It's like, no, no, no. This is our value and this is how we will act to back it up. So that is really, really exciting to me. Um, and there's one thing that I really, really do not like about it that I will speak to about in a minute that is very serious. And there's one thing that I don't like about it that is so petty. And the petty thing is, it's so hard to teach. I can do my elevator survey. I can do my elevator about the principles, my elevator speech about the principles. I got it down, but there's so many more words, you guys. It was definitely written by committee. It's so less poetic, and I know that that's not the most important thing, but it that's difficult for me, and I'm not somebody who has a fetishization of the written word. Obviously, I'm not somebody who thinks that something can only be beautiful if it's written down and crafted and poetically, but this isn't, and it's difficult for me. Okay, the thing that I really don't like about it, you guys ready for this? One of my favorite things about Unitarian Universalism is our freedom to engage with what is larger than ourselves in whatever terms work for us. Because for me, the word God is okay. And for some of you, it is not. And that is all okay. And for me, the word uh, spirit is great. And for some of you, it's not. Unitarian Universalism, the principles do not tell us how we should engage with what is larger than us. They don't say that the force out there is called, and the principles do. They are telling us that God is love. There is which is fine for some people, and love is probably the most innocuous thing that you could call the whatever it is that binds us together. But here's the thing: I've had congregant who is an addict come to me and say, my higher power can't be love. It can't be. That's not enough for me to continue my steps. I've had a congregant who's been in an abusive relationship say, love is something that somebody told me when they were hurting me very badly. And and so the way the principles are now, they say, you know, it can be, you can have whatever word you want for what is ultimate. And it doesn't have to be one word. And now they're saying it has to be love. There is literally a line in there that says, love is the power that binds us all together. And that is not my theology. And before the UUA wasn't, the principles weren't telling me what my theology had to be. And now they are. And even though it's love, and love um isn't is one of the more mild things that they could be telling us our God figure is. I don't I don't want them to tell us it's anything. So I hate the theology and I love the action.
That's fantastic. Thank you. A historical question now. How long have Unitarianism and Universalism existed?
Oh, that depends on whether you want it to be a capital U Unitarian or a small u Unitarian and Universalist. The theologies of Unitarian and Universalism have existed nearly as long as uh, the Christianity that they were trying to fit into. So as soon as so basically the after Jesus' death for the first like 300 years, everyone was chilling in these communities where they didn't have all the same ideas about what salvation was, who Jesus was, all of those things. And a lot of communities thought Jesus was just some guy who taught them a lot of cool things, and, told us to love each other. And they were, people were good with that. And then there were some other communities who thought that Jesus was like God incarnate walking around on earth. And, the Roman Empire wanted to be able to control people. So they're like, all right, we're going to get together and we're all going to decide one thing. There was actually this there was a big fight at the Council of Nicaea about whether Jesus was the same substance as God, meaning Jesus and God were one thing, and that became the Trinity. Like because later, a few years later, they added the Holy Spirit to that concoction. But there were Unitarians there, prototype Unitarians, arguing that Jesus was not God, and that God was like one thing, Unitarian, non-Trinitarian. So the theologies, and the same thing, there was this guy Origen back in the 200s arguing that there was no such thing as universal suffering, after that we should be universally that God loved everyone and we should be universally saved. So like back in the early days of Christianity, there were these theologies of Unitarian and Universalism fighting against the empire's dominant narrative of Jesus died for your sins, so you should behave. Which is, what won out, because the empire usually gets its way, right? And there were people fighting against that were prototype Unitarians saying, wait, no. God loves everyone, and, Jesus was a teacher. The actual Unitarian and Universalist as denominations, it's much more clearer to say Unitarian. There was a guy named William Ellery Channing in 1819 who got up and gave a sermon in Boston called Unitarian Christianity, in which he basically said there's no biblical evidence for the Trinity in the Bible. I taught myself Greek, and this is why, and I read the Bible, and there's no biblical evidence for it. And you guys, can Jesus just go be a teacher? We've been talking about this for 2,000 years. I think we were right, and we're going to form our own denomination. And so that, like, basically 1819 is when Unitarianism began. There are some stories of a Universalist minister named John Murray coming over and starting a church in New Jersey, of all places, where he started preaching universalism, and people say that was the beginning of universalism in America, but it's not really, because there was like this Presbyterian guy called George de Benville who was over in Pennsylvania in the 1600s preaching the same theology. I think the time that we can most accurately pinpoint, like, okay, this is when a denomination formed, is when Hosea Ballou in 1805 wrote a treatise on atonement, in which he argued for universal salvation. He argued against hell and punishment. And that was the time that, like, the intellectual elites in Boston kind of took it up. Before then, universalism had been this, like, sort of prairie, life is hard enough, God is too good to damn us after this sort of movement. And it became a denomination with funding at churches after that 1805 treatise.
Awesome. Thank you for the history lesson. And a kind of, not really a follow-up, but related question. Should UUs try to create mega churches? Do we have any now?
I don't think UUs can create mega churches. I think in order to create a mega church, you have to you have to imbue the staff with, like, a level of authority that UUs will never be comfortable with, and allow people to make decisions and say that this is what's going on without having, like, a town hall. No, UUs don't have a mega church. They have a church in Madison that has, like, about it did have 1,500 members at one point, and a church in Tulsa that had 2,000 members. Here's the thing. Here's the difference between, I interned at that church in Madison, and I almost interned in the church in Tulsa. And they have 400 people showing up to service on Sunday morning, so they have that many members, but they don't have the big rock concert. It seems very much like, a service that, you would see at Southfield or at Detroit. Mega churches are, I think the response to people not wanting to engage with the world is getting harder and harder. So they're like, we're going to build these walls, we're going to entertain you, we're going to take care of your kids, we're going to build a grocery store and a daycare and a gym, and you don't have to leave If you give us your money, you don't have to leave. We'll tell you everything's going to be okay. And you're going to go, you know, don't engage with the world. And I think that's antithetical to what you want to do. I think that we want to go out and engage with the world and save it and savor it at the same time. I think we don't want to hear that everything's okay if it's not. I think that we don't want, um, I don't think that we want people in the pulpit telling us how to live our lives and what to think and feel. And I'm really glad at that because I have no idea how to tell you to live your lives or what to think and feel. So I don't think we can, and I don't think we should. And if the question is about that, if the question is, do you think that we should build community centers where people feel more supported and have access to resources? Like, yeah, tell me how to fund it and let's do it.
Good. Continuing in this line is, what's a good way we can honor indigenous populations beyond acknowledging that we're on unceded territory?
Yeah, thank you. So I have such feelings about the land acknowledgement because I think it is so important, but we've been doing it for years. And if we're not going to actually do anything beyond it, it just kind of sounds like bragging. Like, we took your land, we're just going to go on with our regular service now. Again, I think it's all about relationships. I think it's all about relationships. And that was tricky a while ago because a lot of indigenous people and organizations were rightfully very mistrustful. I think that there's been some really, really good work. Moose Gin has been doing some really good work, and Jenny Teed, who's a member of the UU Detroit Church, she's been doing really good relationship building and listening sessions with folks who are with indigenous organizations who are now reaching out and saying, okay, beyond the land acknowledgement, this is what we want you to do. And I'm looking forward into the next year working with Moose Jen, working with Jenny, and figuring out, again, not what I think should be done, but what they think should be done.
Nice. And now that I've lulled you into a false sense of security, what can we be doing to help our nation survive 2024?
I think I have a more like apocalyptic sense of this than many people. I once heard someone give this great sci-fi sermon where they talked about like hope instilled in different sci-fi universes. Like, one of them was the Star Trek universe where it's like we will get our political stuff together and we'll figure out, how to live as a society peacefully and well. And then another one was like the Star Wars universe, which was like we're all gonna band together and fight the bad guys and like, magic will ensue everywhere. And there will be cute creatures that we will save the world for, which and then there was the firefly kind of hope. And I know I'm veering off here. But stay with me. Have any of you seen Firefly, the sci-fi show Firefly? Yes, David and Sally have it. So good. It's so good. Steve has seen it. It was tragically like one season in a movie, but it was brilliant writing. And it was this crew that was just floating around a dystopian universe trying to save each other, like all the time, over and over again. And it was very clear that the goal was not to fix the universe because it wasn't fixable. And they were just trying to take care of each other. I don't know that there's anything that average people can do to fix our political system because the political system is designed to only listen to people who have power. And if one of us had the amount of money and power that could actually change that, you need to come talk to me because I really want to raise them. No, I'm joking, but we should be doing a lot more things with that money. I don't think that we have the power anymore. I think it's gotten so out of our hands. I think our world has turned so much into an oligarchy that we can do our best. We can make our phone calls, but research has come out over and over and over again that says that people only listen to money. Politicians only listen to money, that there isn't really as much of a way to influence what's going to happen. And that even if we elect, here's the thing, even if we elect the people that are the better options, that's not going to move the needle too much. It'll like be a slower burn towards climate failure and health catastrophe, but it's not going to change things completely. So what I think our job is to build those little ships, is to build up communities where we're going to take such good care of each other, no matter how apocalyptic things get. And I know that there are people out there, my husband is one of them, that are still fiercely trying to fix the systems. And what I want to do is like cook meals and sing songs for those people and make sure that there are communities that are a wellspring for the values and for the, oh, this is why we're doing it. I want to make sure that that the revolution is fueled with church lasagnas. So I don't know that I think that we as a community, I wish I could say like we need to band all of our voices together and get out the vote, and we need to you know, stop pollutants from destroying the planet. We need to, I don't know that we can anymore. I don't know that we can't. I think that at some point we've got to have a reckoning with what's happening in our society, but I think that reckoning is maybe out of my hands. I'm going to keep talking now. No, I'm not saying go put our heads in the sand. I want to keep talking about it. I'm at a protest once a week. Like, I think that we should keep raising our voices and keep taking it to the streets and keep talking to our elected officials. But more than any of that, I think we've gotten to the point where we need to build strong communities that are going to take care of each other, even when the hardest stuff hits, because it might be coming.
There's a good comment like Thich Nhat Hanh, walk with those who suffer, as that is being present in the moment.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Can I just say that? Yes, that reminds me. I was in a hospital situation and I was giving care to someone whose loved one had just died. And they were just walking up and down the hallway, just like screaming. And I just walked with them. And it was one of those moments of like, I cannot do anything to help this person and their grief, but I cannot leave. And it was one of the hardest moments of ministry that I've ever had, like that feeling of like helplessness and necessary presence. And I wonder if that's not what we're doing with the whole world right now.
Going back through, oh, here's a question that I missed from earlier. As someone curious and new to UU, how would you describe a UU church / practices / things that set us apart? I think we've done a good job of talking through a lot of our values already.
I think what I tell people, the first thing I tell people about in the sort of elevator speech is like, when you're asking about a religion, most of the time you're asking like, what do you believe about the ultimate source of power in the state of the human soul? And Unitarian Universalists have just like roundly decided that we don't and can't know. Like, we don't and can't know the name or form of the ultimate or what's going on with the state of the human soul. But we do know that we're better than when we're together. And we do know that each person seems whole and worthy and that we should uplift each person. So we don't get together. We talk about the state of the ultimate in the human soul because it's interesting to talk about, but we don't come to be in line with any particular answer to those questions. We come to live out our values that are around being together and our connections, our human connections, our connections with the earth, and our connections with what is more, whatever form or shape we think they take, so that we can live ethical, good lives and create community, because the word religion comes from religios, which means to bind together what has been torn asunder. So what we're really just trying to do is re-engage with each other in a way that feels holy, as in to make whole.
What's the best way for visitors that are new to UU to learn more?
Just come. like honestly, it's hard to describe a UU church more than the nothing it tells you anything is more than experiencing it. I mean, you can read the books and you can hear the history, but honestly, the history even, I mean, we're not really contemplating what it means for Trinitarian versus Unitarian anymore, right? Like our name is like 10 syllables of outdated theology. Our, you know, come talk to us, experience sitting and singing a hymn all together. It's like, wait, this is a church hymn, but we're not singing about our shame or what we should be doing. We're singing about how to lift each other up as we lift our own voices. And it's a really powerful experience. And I think to understand Unitarian Universalism, you have to experience it.
That has taken us through the questions.
Amazing. Okay, here's a question. Does anybody want to ask a question of anyone in the room? So does anybody have a question that they're like, I want to hear, or any of the questions that just happened? Like, is anybody like, I want to hear what everybody's opinion is on this? Because I've been talking a lot, and you all have really good opinions and thoughts too.
So we're going back a couple topics to the politics one. There's been some comments. Politics should not be based on the amount of money you have, but what you can do to help this country. And
Amen.
I think that, speaking as someone who's run for office a couple of times, the amount of money that is in our campaigns right now is out of control and absolutely ridiculous. I ran for city council, which is a very part-time job that makes $7 grand a year, and there was people who spent 30 grand on the seat. It's obscene, particularly in these local races where so much is at stake, and so much control can be ceded over just by people spending more money.
So we can wrap up early. We've only got about 10 minutes left, but I'd also love it if you guys would chat with anything that you disagreed with me about, anything that you were like, yeah, no, I really loved that. Anything that you're like, I want to hear other people's opinions about anything we talked about.
And what I'm going to do, I just opened up the chat so everyone can chat directly to the group.
That's great, Alex. Thank you.
Private messaging is still going to be turned off except for co-hosts, but you can message the group directly now.
Steve Curtin talks the fifth sacred thing is scarily plausible to look into the near future. I don't know the fifth sacred thing. Steve, do you want to tell us what it is?
Oops.
You're good, Steve.
It is everybody's heard of Starhawk, right? Did you know that she wrote not one, but 3 science fiction novels? The first one being The Fifth Sacred Thing. And in it, what has happened is it's like 20 years from now, and Los Angeles has become basically a religious dictatorship. And San Francisco, of course, she's a San Fran person, has become a shelter unto itself against the religious dictatorship. It's fascinating reading, especially it seems to be all unfortunately unwinding itself in that direction.
Julia, there was a last minute question that came in. You used the term hard truths. Can you please define the term and give us an example? It'll help us understand your ministerial style better.
That's a good question. Sometimes it's hard, and maybe that's a harsh term, hard truths. I don't remember what context I used it in, but I'm sure I did. Sometimes it's hard to come to terms with things, to say things in a church. Like, things aren't going to go back to the way they were before the pandemic. That's a hard truth. Like, things are not going to go back to the way they were before pandemic. And sometimes we need to say those things out loud. Sometimes we need to tell each other, hey, your behavior, it was harmful and it's not conducive to making community. And if we, or sometimes we need to say, our goals are unrealistic. This isn't a thing we're going to achieve. And those things are hard to say. But if they're true, we need to say them out loud. And not only do we need to say them out loud, we need to be saying them with compassion, knowing that they're going to be hard for people to hear. And we as also the people that are hearing them are going to need to stop and receive those things. Because so many times we as people that don't want to hurt each other refrain from saying things that are hard to avoid conflict. And I think we should not aim to hurt one another. And I think that we need to talk to each other about things that are hard and real. And I think that a lot of times we don't, because we don't want to hurt each other. And I think there's a difference between hurting each other and being honest with hard things.
I don't know if you see Dan's question in the chat. What do you see as the direction of the UUA at the national level?
I've spent a lot of time trying to not answer that question, Dan. I don't know. It seems like the UUA go through a reckoning also, that the same thing that the churches are going through, that we're a shrinking, all denominations are shrinking, and we've got to do things vastly differently if we want Unitarian Universalism and church and spiritual community in this structure to remain relevant, or maybe it needs a new structure. And the UUA is an institutional system that is not set up for big structural change. So I think right now they're trying to like reform what we've always been doing sort of in the same way, and not really grappling with the like what can look different, except they are very invested in this cool new interesting thing that's going on in Michigan, where a couple of churches are trying to figure out how we can reform some stuff. I've heard that the president of the UUA herself has said, please keep me informed about this situation. It's cool and innovative. So I don't know what's going on. I think the UUA is going to have to decide whether it wants to be a justice organization in and of itself, where it does direct service and public witness, which I think should be part of its job and is certainly inspiring to me and something I love to see from our national denomination in some amount, or if it's going to directly service our congregation, the congregations, which it has moved away from a little bit, and I think that was its original mission. So I think it's grappling with that, and I'm glad I'm not the person that has to do it. So one last thing, it says, has there been interest in talkback to enable interested persons to delve into the message of that? You mean like a talkback after a sermon? Who said that? Glenn. I don't know, y'all want to do that? There's no reason people couldn't like have a table, like a talkback table in coffee hour, where people get together and talk about the message of the day. You want to do it? Let's do it. Look at that. It's all education. It just happened.
Adult
So
RE can happen at any time.
So Glenn, you're going to set up the first one at on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Detroit. All right, folks, I'm so glad I got to spend this time with you. Alex has a closing song for us, and then I will extinguish the chalice. Thank you for being here today. I hope you all have a bright and brilliant New Year's Eve and enjoy yourselves. Instead of finishing the year strong, why don't we finish the year soft? Why don't we finish the year restful and grateful for making it through yet another messy, beautiful turn of the year? Go in peace. Return in love. See you all at Northwest in a week.